So anybody wants to express a view? Edward, since your name has been mentioned. Professor Edward Ng, who has been doing a lot of very relevant work for the government. You want to say something first?
I will be here forever if you want me to say something. I am academic. Two things about academics. Academics can speak forever. An academic has freedom of speech. So if you don't mind, I will start. The first thing is buildings don't consume energy. It's the people inside building that consume energy when they are doing their activities. So we must concentrate on understanding the activities inside building that may consume energy, lead to people using energy, than the building system, building features, and that kind of hardware too much. That's the first thing. And when people don't like the environment outside their window, they would use their fingers to switch on their air conditioner or their light and other things. And when I was young, I have a choice not to do that. But I must say, because of the way that we mess up our built environment in the last 30 or odd years, urban heat island, all these other things, we don't have a choice to even open our window for the natural environment outside. And therefore, we have to rely on energy and therefore lead to the need of energy efficient building because of the mistake we have made. It's not because we're doing good deed, it's because we're trying to repair the damage we have done. Hong Kong has gone very far, but we have a long way to go. Now, the one thing I would like to say is low carbon principles means climate-based principles. And that is the reason why I have been trying very hard to help the government, drawing up this so-called map that I hope one day it can see the light. I'm quite sure that Secretary Lam, you will have to be very brave to launch it, because it says something that most of you would not like to see. Now this is what I'm trying to get at, is that if you cannot get the city urban environment correct, by the time it comes to the building site, the developers and people like them, the battle has been lost, and it is unfair to them. So I must say that my last point is that we all own the city, so we all must find a way to share the load of making our urban environment better. We must all, for example, set our own building back, do our own fair share, plant our own fair share of trees and things like that strategically, so that the environment can be better and so that my son can choose to open the window instead of switching on the aircon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edward. I can assure you that if I were still the Secretary for Development, when you finish your assignment, I will be bold enough to get it launched. In fact, there's a little bit of secret which involves several of us. Last October, the Chief Executive announced Conserving Central, the Central Business District in Central, with 8 projects. Amongst the 8 projects is an initiative to conserve a Grade 3 historic building called the Central Market. Actually, that building is not pretty at all. Some will describe it as a pretty ugly building. But I actually got some initial work from Edward and looked at his urban climatic map and realized that if we were to knock down this 3-story Central Market building and replace it by a 45-story commercial building, it will be outrageous in terms of air ventilation and so on. So with that piece of evidence yet to be proven, I persuaded the Chief Executive to save the Central Market building, which I then immediately passed on to Barry Cheung to conserve as one of the URA projects. So you know there's a little bit of conspiracy and gangs in the academia, in the government, in the NGO sector in order to get things done in Hong Kong. That's a joke aside. Anybody wants to share your views?
Perhaps the 3 main speakers have set the scene, as it were, that new buildings has to be put in the context of the whole urban environment. And but new buildings are adding energy consumption.
Can I just add?
Please do.
Talking about conspiracy, what Carrie gave me, or gave us, was worth over $1 billion US. So that small piece of land was worth a lot of money.
May I continue? You have $1 billion, I don't. We have in our midst Mr. Eugene Kong, who is the chairman of KPF, the renowned architect, who not only have worked throughout the United States and New York, but also all over Asia and in this part of the world, setting standard, as it were, of new buildings. And Mayor Bloomberg this morning referred to some new legislation for New York and so on. I'm wondering whether, Gene, you can sort of tell us something more about things happening in New York in the whole urban context as well.
Thank you, Andrew. Is that on? Okay. I wanted to make a few observations first. One, obviously, new construction affords one the chance to really design green buildings and buildings that are energy efficient, sustainable. But you know, there are a lot of forces at work dealing with the environment. One is population growth. An enormous population needs homes, they need offices, they need buildings. So we are building buildings for people, and we still have to design them for the function they were meant to be and to be inspirational as environments for work, play, living, etc. So there are a number of environments we're trying to create, and obviously being green is one of them, and it's very key. With new construction, you also have the ability to plan an area, creating open space, dealing with transportation, relationship of buildings, sun, shadow, etc. And in many places of the world, there are now regulations that really set what much of these buildings have to do in terms of their goals. With new construction, you can deal with the exterior wall, with ventilation, whether you provide windows that open or fixed. You can deal with all those different issues, sun control by shading, all types of light shelves that bring light deep into the office, proper ceiling heights, all the environmental issues that make a building an excellent building and one that's green. But I also wanted to comment that we are, in Asia, obviously, we talk about expansion and cities that are growing. But there are many cities in the world, particularly North America and Europe, where it's the reverse. They're shrinking. Cleveland, for example, used to be 1 million people. It's now 500,000. Detroit has lost much of its core, and so there are vast areas where the city's dilapidated without any buildings or any buildings being occupied. And yet utilities have to stretch the full dimension of the city to serve these buildings and outlying areas. A lot of times buildings are built for the wrong reason. There was a period of time because of economics that in the 80s in the US there was write-offs given for buildings, the loss in building value, and a lot of buildings were built to take losses that amounted to 3 or 4 times your investment. And those buildings remained vacant and caused a tremendous overbuilding in the 80s, of buildings being way out in the suburbs, and then causing enormous, again, service of utilities, roads to these buildings that remain unoccupied. So what I'm really leading to, there's so many different forces at work that create situations that from an environmental point of view are obviously not ideal. So when we look at dealing with the environment, obviously new construction in cities like Hong Kong or Shanghai, Beijing, et cetera, are much easier to deal with than saving older neighborhoods, or neighborhoods where even the reuse of buildings makes little sense because there are no ones to be there. This morning, someone was talking about density. I think it was in one of the Berlin or Moscow, but an area where they were going to add more density. But if the density doesn't exist, if the population is not there, you can't infill empty sites with more buildings unless there's a need. And so I think we need to look at cities that are growing, but we also need to look at cities that are shrinking and how to deal effectively with energy situations there, which I think are much greater concern as well. So it's not a simple matter. And I think by all of us working together, academics, government, architects, developers, and remember, developers for the most part are building to make a profit, and we understand that, and we try to design buildings to do that, but there need to be some regulations that keep the development community responding to the goals of the city, and I think most will do that. So initial comments, but New York under Mayor Bloomberg, by the way, is a phenomenal city. The mayor's done a great job, and I couldn't be personally more delighted that he will be heading up the C4 Cities conference. And what he's doing in New York is making everybody conscious of the need to have buildings that are, in fact, sustainable, energy efficient, and passing laws that will enforce that. So I think New York's going to be one of the leading cities as a result of the mayor, and delighted for this conference.
Mrs. Lam has described we will have mandatory measures as from next April. Are you having similar in New York?
Yes, a lot of the cities we work in have mandatory requirements, which makes it a bit easier, since everybody knows what the rule is and works toward it, rather than everybody searching for different answers. I think it is important to either have a series of guidelines or laws that people need to meet in order to provide buildings that are going to be appropriately sustainable and green. So I'm not against that. I think it's important.
Before letting you go, Jean, I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
Your company, in fact, and mine, have done this Songdo city, eco-city in Seoul, in Cheong, which compared with what CCI is doing and compared with what Professor Tang has been describing the need for China, and a lot of people have been planning with low carbon principles, new communities, that every building is green and so on. Would you care to comment on the relevance of that to places like cities in China or, for that matter,
Sure.
Hong Kong?
Well, again, the advantage of Songdo was it's 1,500 acres. It's all landfilled at Incheon. It's about 10 minutes from the new Incheon airport. A bridge is built by the government to connect the airport directly to Songdo, so that within 10 or 15 minutes of getting through customs and your bags, you could be in your hotel. So not an hour or two drive on the highway as you many times do going to Seoul. So that was advantage number one. It's a total city with, including golf course and convention center, hotels, offices, and residents, but all designed to be energy efficient and sustainable. Enormous amount of green space. I think the green space may be equal to 40% or more of the entire area. Great Central Park. There's waterways for boats to bring people to their homes. There's windmills providing energy. There's bikes. There's subways. All of the things that are reducing the carbon footprint of the city. So it's totally new. And it's been designed for the purpose of providing a wonderful environment to live and work in, but also one that is certainly sustainable. And it's about 30% or 40% complete, designed to be built and complete, designed and built in 15 to 20 years max. So it's an amazing accomplishment of several hundred, there's at least 100 million square feet of buildings being constructed almost all at one time. So it's a terrific process, and I think has great meaning for China and other areas of Asia where new cities or sections of cities can be built and meet all those standards.